It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Hey there. Hello there. Hi there. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me. As always, Douglas Coleman. How are you? We've got David Giffels here today. David is a professor of English at the University of Akron. He's also an author. He has written 6 books of nonfiction. And his latest book, Barnstorming Ohio, is the book that we are featuring on this show today. Talks about the diversity of Ohio as a state and how it's a bellwether for presidential elections. And with our big election coming up in just a couple of weeks, I thought it was a good idea to have David on the show. So we get into a good conversation about America and what's going on right now. For more information about David, you can check out his website at davidgiffels.com. That's DavidGiffels.com. So stick around. We will be right back with David Giffels.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps, record producer. This is my story about Elton John, working with him in those early years, going back to 1967 at Dick James. All the amazing tours, those first recordings, going through to Rocket Records, and it's an amazing story about his incredible rise to stardom and my part in that. So look forward to taking you on that journey. So here we go. Yeah, and to order this great audio CD, please just email me at stuartepps@talk21.com. That's Stuart, S-T-U-A-R-T, Epps, E-P-P-S, at talk, T-A-L-K, 21 in figures.com. Stuart Epps at talk21.com. Email me and I'll give you all the details for buying this brilliant audio disc. Thank you. Bye.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Tired of living in a culture of lies, fake news, and alternative facts? The Pro-Truth Pledge reverses the tide of lies by calling on politicians, and everyone else, to commit to truth-oriented behaviors. The pledge asks signees to commit to 12 behaviors that research in behavioral science shows lead to truthfulness, such as clarifying one's opinions and the facts, citing one's sources, and celebrating people who update their beliefs toward the truth. Private citizens who sign the pledge get the benefit of contributing to a more truth-oriented society. Public figures get more substantive rewards for signing the pledge in the form of positive media and public recognition. The pledge crowdsources the truth by asking volunteers to evaluate the statements of public figures who sign the pledge. Take the pledge, demand that your elected representatives do so, and encourage your friends to take it at protruthpledge.org.
Love coffee, huh? But wait a minute. It seems like every time you finish a cup of coffee, you get all of these side effects along with it. heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, acid reflux. As the world's first and only organic acid-free coffee, Tyler's Coffee is able to provide a healthier option in the solution for more than 100 million individuals who have sensitive stomachs or suffer from acid-related modalities. This is Tyler's acid-free coffee. Coffee without the consequences.
Are you an independent musician? How would you like to have your songs played on hundreds of radio stations just like the one you're listening to right now? Join MusicSubmit.com and we'll promote your music to radio stations and blogs in your genre. It's free to set up your account, and we guarantee your music will be considered for airplay by radio stations worldwide. Why not sign up today? It's free. MusicSubmit.com. Radio promotion for indie musicians.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions. You're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, David Giffels. Hi, David. How are you?
Hi, Douglas. I'm well. How are you?
Doing fine. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Let's see. You're an author, 6 books, nonfiction, and your latest book. Is this your latest book, Barnstorming Ohio?
It is. Just out last month.
Okay. Why don't you tell us a bit about the book?
Sure. Barnstorming Ohio is my account of spending a year traveling around my home state of Ohio, always known as a political and cultural bellwether, listening to people and going to places that I hoped would help us understand the national story as we head toward the 2020 presidential election. As I said, Ohio has always kind of uniquely had a way of telling the national story, and there are a lot of sort of data trends that show how kind of uncannily accurate Ohio is in sort of predicting the next president and choosing on election day the person who's the winner. And so I thought that there would be some, in times when I think a lot of us are looking for answers, some insight from the people that live here and kind of tell that national story.
Okay, well, Ohio is a real cross-section of people, right? You've got farmers, you've got industrial centers on the lake. Was it Lake Erie? And
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, is parts of the state more Republican and parts more Democrat? Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, and in fact, the reason that that political scientists and pollsters and journalists and other observers turn to Ohio is it's actually quantifiable. There's an effect that's called the 5 Ohios, and it's and what that refers to is there are 5 distinct regions in Ohio that are each sort of distinctly diverse from each other, and taken in aggregate, they kind of reflect the national story, so that the northeast part of the state where I live is much more like the east, much more urban, more culturally and racially diverse. It's very industrial and post-industrial. And then, as you said, there's a vast region of farmland in the northwest part of the state that kind of is the beginning of the true American Midwest, and it has very different voting patterns. And then there's the southeastern part of the state, which is Appalachian, very poor, more sparsely populated. It's where the opioid crisis has kind of had its epicenter. Then there is the southwest part of the state, which is dominated by Cincinnati and is much more of a southern influenced region, much different than the northeast urban centers. And then finally, there's Columbus in the center of the state, which is it's the only growing urban population in the state. It's much more wealthy and suburban and exurban. And within each of those regions, they have their own, it's like each one has its own media, self-contained media centers. Each one has its own voting patterns and so forth. So when you talk about, what we refer to as Trump country, that southeastern Appalachian region that I spoke of earlier is very much dominated by the sort of like non-college educated white voters that we think of as that block of Trump voters. And then conversely, the urban centers, which are more diverse, are very blue. I live in Akron, Ohio, about 40 minutes from Cleveland, and our area of the state is, at least within the cities, is sort of very heavily Democratic. Like Akron hasn't had a Republican mayor since like 1970.
What's the state of the economy in Akron?
In Akron, Akron is sort of a quintessential Rust Belt city. So it's so we've been dealing with population and job loss for a couple of generations. Our unemployment numbers, you take these things into the context of COVID, and unemployment is actually a little bit lower than the national average. The economy, like most post-industrial cities, is continually working on reinventing itself, moving away from manufacturing and into, in Akron especially, a lot of focus on innovation, on nurturing small businesses. And there's still, Akron was the center of the rubber industry, and there's still a lot of the research. Goodyear Tire is still headquartered here, the largest tire company in America. And there's a lot of research surrounding that, and a lot of small startups that springboard off of that. So that's the sort of nutshell of the economy in my hometown.
Is Goodyear Tire, is that the number one employer of Akron?
Absolutely. In fact, I don't know if you followed this recently. Cities like Akron that have one or two big employers, those are really important. So when you talk about the economic picture, much more important, than a city that's got, several sort of Fortune 500 companies. And recently, Donald Trump got wind that Goodyear had a policy that its employees couldn't wear clothing with political slogans on them. And he took that as an affront, thinking that meant they couldn't wear MAGA hats. And so he tweeted out not to buy Goodyear tires. And in fact, Goodyear's stock price took a temporary dip as a result of that tweet, because a tweet from the president can have a quick, big effect. And it was almost like an uproar from the city, because that's, we protect our big economic anchors. And so there was like a serious, dramatic backlash at that moment when that tweet went out.
I kind of remember that. Was the ban on wearing political messages on your clothes at work, was that only pertaining to Trump stuff, or was it anybody?
It was, what happened is there was somebody posted a training slide from one of their divisions somewhere outside of it wasn't in Akron, it was at one of their other divisions in the South. And I think the slide said that it made the distinction something like between social consciousness and political advertising. So as I recall, Black Lives Matter was okay, but a MAGA hat wasn't okay. And so you can kind of see where
the problem
Donald Trump's thinking would go. But if you're following the letter of what they said, one of them leans towards social consciousness, one doesn't. You could argue that Black Lives Matter is a political statement, but it's not a campaign statement. So anyway, the nuance of it was not was kind of lost as soon as the tweet came raging outward.
Well, it's vague. And people could make the argument justifiably both ways with that. And,
right.
Companies should just probably outright ban any sort of statements one way or the other. In other words, a lot of companies, they have uniforms, which,
right.
Isn't a bad idea, because I've seen schools, in fact, I taught English for several years outside of the United States. And where I was, the kids from kindergarten all the way through university had to wear uniforms at the public schools. The private schools could do what they like, but the private schools all wore uniforms as well. My point is that it keeps people together. It's kind of a strange sort of way to bond people into a common purpose. And in the schools, the common purpose obviously was to get an education. If everyone is working at a particular company, there is a particular bond there. And I don't think it's such a half bad idea to just have everybody wearing uniforms. But in America, it's really hard to get everybody to walk on a straight line the same direction. we have a big problem with that in this country because of the nature of our country. You know, it's every man for himself, independence, independent thinking, which are great concepts, but it does get us in trouble sometimes.
Right. But of course, freedom of expression and freedom of so many other things that are our core values don't necessarily jibe with the uniform to work. Although you're talking to somebody who went through 12 years of Catholic school, so my only complaint about the uniform is I hated wearing a tie.
Well, yeah, okay. I mean, there's good and bad to all of it, you know.
Yeah.
But the point is going back to the thing about MAGA hats and Black Lives Matter. I think you're just asking for trouble in a work environment when people start espousing their own personal opinion, be them social justice, be them political, whatever, you know?
Yeah. You know, one of the things I found when I was writing the book, I spent a year traveling. I traveled over 4,000 miles and interviewed more than 100 people, and this was through 2019 and into early 2020. And one of the things that I found very consistently that troubles me is I knew that we were divided, and I knew that there's a lot of either uncivil discourse or discourse that only takes place within people who look and sound just like us and hold our same ideals. And my very strong intent with Barnstorming Ohio was to talk to people on their own terms. I made sure that I wanted people to be alive in this book as individuals, and I resisted making them a type that would stand for something more than just themselves, because we don't get to do that very often anymore. As soon as I tell you who I voted for in the last presidential election, you'll start to line up characteristics that you think fit the profile of that voter, right? Not you personally, or maybe you personally, but people do that.
No,
and what I
understand.
found when I would talk to people, and they knew that I wasn't trying to, just like turn them into a polling data or anything, they still were uncomfortable talking about their political affiliation or who they had voted for, being specific, because I think people right now are recoiling, like afraid that we're going to be stereotyped or narrowcast because of where we are politically. And I think that's a problem. I think it's, I can remember having, like heated political talks with friends and even, I've worked as a newspaper journalist for 18 years. So in those contexts, but they weren't uncivil or even reaching the point where people would be even afraid to have that conversation. And I feel like that's one of the most concerning and maybe even dangerous conditions of present day American life.
I would argue that the people that are Trump supporters in this country feel very reluctant to share their political views, particularly with the pollsters, where the people that are on the liberal side of the aisle are not. We saw this happen in 2016. I think when the pollsters call, and it's particularly bad now because of how divided the country is, I think a lot of people who are going to vote for Trump, if they get asked, they say, "Oh, I don't know yet," or they just refuse to answer.
Right.
And it's very unfortunate that people need to hide their political views. I think this is probably the first time since maybe Nixon with his silent majority. I can remember as a kid, that was one of the things that we followed in school, was the 72 election. And from what I can remember of it, it seems like that the McGovern people were very, very vocal with their political opinions at the time. And the people for Nixon were not. And yet, if you look at the map of the election, it was a slaughter. McGovern got one state.
Right. Well, we're talking about a month before the election, and a poll just came out earlier this week that showed Ohio basically at a dead heat, but also that there were 7% undecided voters. And I was talking in another interview earlier this week, and somebody said, how could there be 7% in this moment of division who haven't made up their mind yet? We were laughing about it, but you might be sort of striking right to the heart of that could be the 7% who either haven't decided whether they'll vote at all, or,
that could be.
Or are sort of kind of hiding their vote. One of the chapters in Barnstorming Ohio is about an Ohio politician named Jim Trafficant. He was a congressman from the Youngstown area, very in his time, very much in that cusp between its industrial heyday and the beginning of its Rust Belt problems. And I don't know if you remember him. He was sort of this bigger than life character, almost cartoonish character. And he's been called the Proto-Trump. He was a populist outsider, blunt and profane, and had this wild hairstyle that was kind of his sort of signature, especially for political cartoonists. He lines up as with so many of Trump's characteristics. And one of the political journalists for the Youngstown newspaper who covered him for his whole career said once that his poll never looked good because nobody will admit they're voting for him, but he would win re-election to Congress by like 75% of the vote, like ridiculous numbers.
Yeah.
To the point where he actually got kicked out of Congress and went to prison on fraud charges, and he twice ran for his congressional seat that he had been banished from, and he got like close to 20% of the vote both times from prison.
From prison.
As a write-in. Yeah. It was, that's a populist to the core. But nobody would admit they were voting for.
There was one like that in Boston. I think his name was James Michael Curley. He was a mayor that was running from prison back I think it was in the 30s or something. But, it's funny. I just watched a special on Teddy Roosevelt, and there are amazing parallels between Teddy Roosevelt and Trump as well, particularly the way the press dealt with him. There were several columns in the New Yorker magazine which referred to Teddy Roosevelt as that 6-year-old in the White House.
Yeah.
Now, I've seen that about Trump, referencing his ego and his temper tantrums and things like that. And apparently Teddy was the same way. He was very...
Yeah.
And he also went all over the country.
Except without the glare of media, right? So we didn't see it the way we see it now.
Well, right. We see it instantly now. People had to read the newspaper.
Yeah, you think, days. Imagine some of our past presidents if they had Twitter, from the 19th century.
An interesting idea.
Grant tweeting drunk in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Imagine Lincoln tweeting. Wouldn't that have been something?
Yeah.
Good idea. I like that. Listen, we're going to wrap it up so you can get on. Your book is called Barnstorming Ohio. My guest is David Giffels. The book is out and about? People can get it now?
The book is out and available wherever fine books are sold, as we say.
Okay. Do you have a website you want to share?
Yeah, my website is davidgiffels.com. It's Giffels. And there are links to buy the book and lots of information about it on there.
Are you on social media?
I'm on Facebook and Twitter.
Okay. We like to follow our guests, so I'm going to go check out your Facebook and Twitter pages. All right, David, thank you so much for coming on the show. Best of luck.
Okay, Douglas, it's been a pleasure.